What's up? How you doing? Here we are. Beautiful night out tonight, but very cloudy. Very cloudy. There's a few breaks, but there's a thin layer. I don't know if it's thin. Maybe it's thick. A thick layer of clouds, which is unusual for here. We don't really have clouds that often, but tonight we do. Fresh water. Delicious. So, board games. Board games. When I was younger, many years ago, I was a big fan of board games. I'd go over to somebody's house, and if they said to me, hey, you want to play Monopoly? Clue. Clue was another cool. I had a cousin. I still have this cousin. She's still around. Doing very good, very healthy. But she loved the game Clue. And she kept hinting, giving clues out that she wanted that game for Christmas. So eventually, I think her sister got it for her. And I remember being at her house and she said, hey, you guys want to play Clue? And I said, yeah, I want to play Clue. Bring it out. So we played that, and I was really into these board games back then. Now, if you tell me to play a board game, I don't know, it seems like big process, but I'll still play. But back then it was a big thing, and I love playing Monopoly. Even now when I go by and I see Monopoly, I go, that's a cool thing. I think I'll get it. Has that nice cash going. The board is awesome, and then you have those metal. What do you call those things? Those metal things that you use to count spots with. But I love Monopoly. Probably that's my favorite one, Monopoly. And then you have the other games like Trouble, Sorry, Life. Even the other ones that don't match anything in the board game genre, like Perfection, Super Perfection. I love all that stuff. So, card games too. Not poker. I don't play that stuff, and I don't really, know any of the other ones either, like Fish, Bridge, whatever those are. Not a gambler. I will play bingo once in a while. The dog out there. When I was a kid, fall time, I'd open up the windows in my room, get the nice fall air to come inside, and I would look out my back window, and in the distance, because it was a little bit hilly, I could see houses built on this hill, and I thought, wow, those houses, they must be very far away. And off in the distance, when the weather was a little bit cooler, you'd hear a dog barking with the echo. Woo, 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 and you'd hear it sound like it was about a mile away. But anyway, I digress. Card games like Uno. Things you enjoyed back then that you don't enjoy anymore because of the iPhone. It's, taking away that innocence that we used to have as a society. Now everything is social media, but back then we had Uno and Old Maid, which I used to play. Thought that was a fun game, Old Maid. I'd play it, somebody would come over, I'd pull out the cards, play Old Maid. Connect Four, love playing Connect Four. What's another one there? I've never played this, but it was popular. That Battleship one had a commercial. At the end, one of the sides would say, "You sank my battleship." That looked like a cool one. But back then, things were very simplistic, but we enjoyed them more. Now, everything is complicated. It's too reality-based. It looks like realistic. So. Bought a magazine I mean, I mean nothing. I mean what I'm saying. It's got good food to eat. I'm not a big believer. I mean, I'm not even like, I don't know if that's the right word, believer, but a lot of these herbal things, they may work to a point, but they're too anemic to work like real medicine that you buy at a drugstore. I mean, maybe if you amplified the active ingredients in some of these herbal, whatever, Herbert Walker, if you amplified it, then maybe, you notice a difference. But, these are like, of course we know that a lot of medicine is made from plants, like aspirin. And I guess some of these work to a point. But, they're not that powerful where, you take them and you cure yourself of all sorts of things. Those are all placebo effects for the most part. Yeah. So, what I was going to say, when I was a kid, about that big, I had neighbors on both sides, but the ones that I'm speaking of right at this moment lived on the left side. As you were facing this way, they would be on that side. So they had 3 daughters, and the youngest one always screamed. A fly would go by, she'd scream. If she dropped something, she'd scream. She'd see a bug, she'd scream. She had a habit of screaming at anything that kind of like disrupted her normal thinking. And then there was the middle sister. She was considered the more of the refined looking ones. And then you had the older one that was more down to earth, decent looking, but not like the second one. And she was very, approachable. So one day she had a Camaro in the driveway that she was washing. And she was vacuuming, so I go, I'm going to go visit her. I was a little kid back then, I'd go visit her. I went up the driveway and they had a dog. Dog's name was Frisky. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't know what Frisky meant. I thought Frisky was a dog's name. I didn't know it was an adjective. So, anyway, I go up and the dog's barking and she's like, quiet, Frisky. And Frisky was a female and stopped barking. And I went, we were talking, and I go, what are you doing? She's like, I'm washing the car, I'm vacuuming and all that. And I said, oh, I see that. So, at some point, I don't know how it worked out, but she went down her basement, and she asked me if I wanted to come down there too. And I said, sure. So I went down there, and it kind of looked like my basement, except different. And she brings me to the wall in the back. There was a wall, and it had maybe like, I don't know, 7, 8 shelves attached to the wall, long ones. And the shelves were packed with board games. They were packed. I don't know how many games were in there. It was packed. And I was looking at it, I go, wow. And she actually let me borrow. She goes, would you like to play, whatever. I said, sure. So she gave me, I don't know if it was Monopoly or Life, but it was one of those. But in the old days, that's what you played. You played board games. You'd get your friends over and you had a big table or on the floor. Usually we played on the floor. And then you'd play for hours and it was fascinating. It was like, engaging. Now I don't know, now to me, to play a board game, it's not really my thing anymore, but I would play, but I wouldn't enjoy it like I enjoyed it back in the old days. So anyway, that was that, and I was fascinated. First time I'd been in that house, even though we were neighbors for many, many, many years. Yeah, they didn't really invite, my neighborhood, you could play with their kids outside, and a lot of these people didn't have kids my age that I'm talking about now. There was a lot of kids in my neighborhood my age, but my neighbors, they were older, and the neighbors on the other side didn't have any children. They were married, but never had kids. And I never ended up in their house except for once. I was like, wow, this is what your house looks like inside. But yeah, board games are huge. And then my mother had a friend, good friend, and she lived downtown. And she lived there since the 1930s. She's no longer around, but back then, when I was a kid, she was there from like 1932 on. Old. So they had two-story house, brick, and then they had a basement, which I would go down because the bathroom was down there. I didn't want to go upstairs in their bedrooms and use that bathroom, so I would go down to the bathroom there, and they also had a wall with shelves and dozens of board games, dozens on that side. And then the husband, he had a big room which he converted into a kitchen. Cast iron stove, cast iron pans and pots and all of that. And one time I was over there visiting my parents, and all the other people were upstairs, and I was with him. He was cooking, and I was watching him cook, cooking things, and then finally he finished. He was a chef, had the hat on and everything, like Chef, what was his name, Brockett, from Neighborhood of Make Believe, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So he said to me, go upstairs and tell everybody to come down, the food is ready. I said, all right. So I went upstairs. I said, food's ready, come down. And then I sat down, and food was awesome. So he was very, very good at what he did, the cooking. That was many years ago. But that house that I'm speaking of at this moment had a very quiet atmosphere. So the lady would sit at the kitchen table. Now these were older people. They were like in their late 60s at the time, maybe early 70s. And in those days, soap operas ruled. So she'd sit there, and from 11 to 4, whatever it was, she'd watch soap opera after soap opera after soap opera. And if my mother missed anything, because my mother used to watch those things too, but if she missed anything of the story, she'd call her up. And she'd say, hey, today I had to go to Morgan Memorial, and I missed the soap operas. Can you give me an update? And she would give her the update. So, yeah. But back in those days, housewives there were many, and now they're not any. I mean, there's very few. So they don't really have these kind of shows for them. Another thing that's disappeared, game shows, which I am a big fan of game shows, huge fan. When I was a kid, if you were home, like say you were like, I don't know, maybe it was a holiday or something, you were home, from 10 o'clock till like 2 or 3, there were game shows. And then in the evening there were game shows. For example, the Newlywed Game would come on in the evening. I had a neighbor when I was little, like 3rd grade, and I would pop up once in a while. He was like Gus the Fireman from Leave It to Beaver. So I'd show up at his place, and he'd let me in, and then I'd sit at the table in the living room while the Newlywed Game was playing. And he would sit in a rocking chair with a plastic container with huge, about that thick cucumbers sliced, big fat tomatoes in there, and he would put a ton of garlic powder, salt and pepper, and he would eat while he would watch the Newlywed Game. And I would say to him, you like that, huh? He goes, yeah, it makes me forget this crazy world. And so I'd watch the game with him, and he was a guy who was born in 1910. So that kind of humor that was on the Newlywed Game, he would find funny. I found it corny, like if they would say, how many times a week do you have whoopee? Whoopee. He found that word, fascinating, if they would even ask that question. And I was like, big deal. But he loved the Newlywed Game. And then another thing that would come on, my parents loved watching The Gong Show. The Gong Show. And they had friends who also loved to watch it, and they would always tell each other, "Did you see it last night? Did you see what he did?" The Gong Show. It's just ice now, so I'm trying to squeeze out the water. But anyway, the thing with me is I loved watching game shows still, even now. Hollywood Squares, Price is Right, Deal of the Century, Sale of the Century, Name That Tune, Wheel of Fortune, which is still around, What's My Line, way back. And what's the other one there? They had to guess who you are. Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's another one that I really used to enjoy. I can't think of the name right now, but it was one where they had like 70, 80 gifts, like gift boxes behind you, and then you would go through a whole process, and at the end, if you won, you would go up the stairs and you would pick a box, and inside that box was a check for like 25 grand or something. And all the other ones had other prizes. Some of them were good, some of them were like junk. And you'd go up there, and there was a guy, he was like, I think he had a beard or something, he looked like a magician, and he would go up there and bring down the box for you, put it at the table, and then the host would kind of look, he'd lift it up a little bit, look inside, and he would say, you sure you want to keep this, or you want to, and then he'd say, no, I want to see what's in there, and then he'd open it up, and sometimes he'd pull out like an apple or a check for like 25 grand. I love watching that show, and the way you got chosen is he would say, look underneath your chair. And I think if it had some paper that said you're the contestant, you would go up there. But even now, I'll go on YouTube and I'll watch an entire episode of Bob Barker, got a little gap there of information. Price is Right. Slipped my mind for a sec. And that was an hour long. Yeah, there was a time when I'd watch it. I remember one summer I would watch that like all the time, every day. It was on from 11 to 12, so I'd make sure I was in front of the TV 11 to 12 when I'd watch it. I loved it. I loved watching The Price is Right. Now I don't watch it that much. I don't know when the last time I watched Drew Carey on The Price is Right. Probably 5 years ago, maybe, and not even a full episode. I just probably watched like 20 minutes. I loved Plinko. What else? I'm trying to think of another one. Tattletale was a good one. I used to watch that, Tattletale. And then, Card Shark with Perry. Perry, what was his first name? Joe Perry? No, it's guitarist. Perry. He was a good game show host, but the best game show host obviously was Guy Smiley from Sesame Street. Anyway, let's see what we got here. Wow, these are a little bit smaller than I thought. Thought they were a little bit bigger, but they're tiny. The instructions, brand new. We will play later. So tonight we had a basic meal. We had hamburgers, which I got at Whole Foods. Really good quality hamburger, good quality meat. And I got top of the line hot dogs. Real meat inside, not you know, the other stuff. I don't want to mention names. I don't know if they use real meat, but it wasn't the basic stuff. It was a good, you know, good company that has them, makes them. So had that, and then, you know, ketchup, mustard. Yeah, there was a time, you know, when you'd be at the beach and the food, you know, when you're at the beach and you eat, food tastes like 10 times better for some reason. I remember back then they had a little truck, and you had to go and wait in line. You know, it was a good line, but it would move, but it was a good line. And everybody would say, you always wanted to hear somebody say, hey, you want me to go up there and get you guys some food? They'd be like, here's the money, go get it. I didn't want to wait in line, but sometimes it was me getting the food and everybody else sitting. So I'd go up there and I'd wait in the hot sand, and then finally it'd be my turn. I'd get burgers, cheeseburgers, and the flavor at the beach was amazing. You know, it was amazing. Or if you went home after the beach and somebody was cooking on real charcoal, like you know, pork chops or something, or steak, it just made it taste so good, especially after the beach. So yeah, the old days. We reminisce, but we can't travel back in time. We only go forward. The days I'm talking about is when the station wagon was the king. My father was the king of the station wagon. Would drive a station wagon, and you know, I'm telling you right now, I was a fan of it too. Very convenient, cozy. The back was big. You know, spread out a blanket. In those days, nobody. I don't know, they knew about seatbelts, but nobody used them, which was a bad thing. You know, if you're a tough guy and you think that you don't need a seatbelt, you hit something at 40 miles an hour without a seatbelt, you're gonna smash up your face, your teeth. You go a little bit faster, you may lose your life. And the seatbelt is not a big deal. Some people, they'll go, you know, to another country where the laws there are not enforced, and they feel intimidated by getting, you know, by a taxi driver. You get in there and it's like, I'm not gonna put it on, it's not cool. It's like, hey, dummy, it's your life, not the cab driver's life. Put your damn seatbelt on before something happens. You hear all these stories, people, you know, they're in an SUV, and there's always one dummy who decides, I'm not putting my belt on, and then they get into an accident because you don't know what time or day the accident's going to happen. That's why they call it an accident. And then you end up being the only one that gets tossed from the SUV, and you land in front of it, and then the SUV runs you over, or you end up, you know, breaking your back and you end up dying, and then everybody else survives it with very few injuries, and you're the only one that got screwed up because you didn't want to wear your seatbelt. Tough guy. Cool tune. But anyway, you always see these stories like, you know, it's like 5 people in an SUV, 4 of them had the brains to put their belt on, and one of them thought that they were too cool. I'm too cool, I can't put the belt on. Might, you know, ruin my tie. And then they get into an accident. Because accidents, yes, they don't happen every minute, every day in your life, but they do happen. And you'll be driving thinking everything's cool, you're not paying attention, and then all of a sudden, boom, you collide with something at 40 miles an hour. Yeah, when I was little, seatbelts, nobody thought about putting them on. You know, so my father would hit the brake or something, and my father, if you were sitting in the back, he would stick his arm in the back and keep you there. And that's all fine if you're doing like 10 miles an hour or 5. But if you're doing 30, 40, 50 miles an hour, that hand, who's holding you? As Lois Lane said to Superman that time. And of course, don't drink and drive. Don't drink and drive. That's the most ridiculous thing you can do, drink and drive. You want to get lit, go to your house, get a bottle of scotch or whatever the hell you like, and get lit in your house. No driving, no nothing. Or go to a hotel, stay overnight, get lit with your friends, and then go home the next day, nice and safe. Or take an Uber. Take an Uber. Nobody is fascinated with drunk drivers, ridiculous. And sometimes you hear these stories about like a rich person or an actor or something like that getting caught drunk driving. Why even put yourself in that position? You're rich. What's the excuse? You couldn't afford what? You couldn't afford the taxi, huh? So yeah, not a fan of that at all. You see too much tragedy based on that, and then the world's already screwed up as it is, so what's the point of adding to it? Anyway, that's it. Ciao for now.